like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet. Good evening, good day, good morning, goeiemorgen, wherever you may be. Welcome here. Welcome to a very, very, very special story. Welcome to our very first Vlamgat on this channel. It's a pleasure and an honor to have the story. And I do thank the gentleman sitting at the other end. I don't want to tell you just yet. I do thank him for volunteering to come and talk with us because, yes, I was passed on his contact details that he had scribbled or somebody else had scribbled on while they were visiting his shop somewhere in what is now known as Gauteng, I think. What the old Transvaal. Anyway, tonight we have a story, a unique story, or today, wherever you may be, very unique story of somebody that brought his aeroplane home, but at the last bit, the aeroplane and he parted company. And unfortunately, on that, what do we call it, life-changing day, things didn't quite work out as they were supposed to. So if I'm right in saying at that stage you were Captain Arthur Piercy, he's here with us this evening to share some of that story. I have a sneaky suspicion we may come back for more on another day, but for now, this evening, would you mind telling us why you landed in the Air Force? Was it your choice, or did you just decide, like so many others, to put your name down for the South African Air Force because you preferred flying and walking and marching wasn't your style? Thank you, sir, for joining us. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Good evening, Fossey. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you tonight. It's an honor to be the first Vlamgat on your prestigious program. I'm going to be starting grade 7, standard 5 in those days. My father took me to an air show at the Old Baragwanath Airport. And now, those of you who know South Africa nowadays, the new Nasrec showgrounds is on the Baragwanath Airport. That's where it was. And it was my very first air show that I can remember. And late the afternoon, about 3, 4 o'clock, you could hear in the commentator and the announcer's voice, something was brewing. And of course, not knowing what was going on, you're looking around, you're fidgeting, you're just not sure what's going to be happening. When all of a sudden from behind us, this Mirage came screaming over us low level at a heavy rate of knots. Everybody got a fright. The dogs were barking, the kids were screaming, the wives were crying, the car alarms were going off in the parking lot from all the noise and everything. And this thing went into a routine, and every time he turns his back towards us, that so-called Vlamgat and that flame out the back there, it made the hair on the arms and the back of my neck stand up straight. And I grabbed my father on the shirt and I said to him, that is what I want to do when I leave school. And there was no plan B. Nothing whatsoever. If I had failed matric or I had failed the medical or I had failed something, do not ask me what I would be doing today because I cannot tell you. There just was no plan B. So anyway, I got through school, barely. I scraped through. Applied for the South African Air Force. I was a bit late in the application, so they already called me up for basics before pilot selection course happened. Then I had a bit of a drama with an ID number because I was born in Rhodesia or Zimbabwe, whichever you want to call it. And leaving school at such an early age, I was only 16 and a half when I left school. you never had a permanent ID number at the time. So when I asked for an ID number to apply for the Air Force, they issued me with my Zimbabwean number. And then suddenly the application was turned down because now I'm not a South African citizen. But I mean, we left the country when I was in Standard 2. So I was a fully fledged citizen. My mother and father were both South African. And so I skipped the first course and managed to get on to the selection board for the second course. This was second course of 1977. We clocked into Donata to go and do our Harvard training. Of course, that led from Harvard training. We went on to the Impalas. And in December of 79, we qualified with our wings. 250 hours in total. That's both 100 hours on Harvards and the rest on Impalas. And I was now destined to become a jet jock for the South African Air Force. After that, we went and did officers course. From there, I ended up as a station pilot at Langebaan for 6 months, waiting for my slot in Petersburg. Clocked into Petersburg, did Impala OTC. And from there, I was posted out to Fast Squadron down in Durban, where I spent 3 years on and off the border while we were there. And then in 1984, I was selected to go on Mirage course. So it was back to Petersburg, 6 months of Mirage course, and then we had a choice. Do you want to be a fighter or do you want to be a mud mover? I know the bomber pilots are going to have something to say about my comments on mud moving. But, you know, a jet, a fighter, is something that shoots through the aeroplanes. Anything other than that, it's a target. So one squadron, we considered them to be targets. They were targets until they threw all their bombs away. Once the bombs were off the aircraft, they became fighters. So I was posted to 3 Squadron at Air Force Base Wardekloof. And there, when I actually arrived at the squadron was on deployment at the time. And I'm speaking out of correction. It was, oh sheesh, now my memory is failing me. Was it the second MiG that was shot down by Johan Rankin? Was it in that period? I'll get my facts straight and we can always come back and fix it. But anyway, so I had to wait for the squadron to get back before we could even start flying. Now, I don't know, I run out of words when the sensation of flying a high-speed performance jet like the Mirage F1 is. First of all, there are no two-seaters. There's no duals. So you have to spend your 10 to 15 hours in the simulator practicing procedures, emergencies, and getting the feel of where the cockpit is, because now the cockpit layout is naturally completely different to the 1,000 hours you spent flying on Impalas. And here comes the first day of your first flight, and it's solo. There's no instructor in the back seat. You've got an instructor standing outside with a throat mic to block the noise out, and he chats and talks you through the whole startup procedures, make sure everything's going okay. And you get airborne, and you scream out, and you go and do what you have to do out in the general flying area. So, that was the start of my jet career, and that sensation was a thrill. Now we had to do a full two-cycle semester, 2 cycles, 6 months each, before we operationally qualified. In the meantime, the Air Force started with their cutbacks in 86, so we were sent off the squadron to Air Force headquarters for a year, and then brought back to the squadron in 1987. Arrived back at the squadron, redid the conversion course, got ourselves up to speed, and June, July of that year, we did our first deployment to Ndangwa. And I had unfortunately fallen off a motorcycle a couple of weeks before that, dislocated my shoulder. And I just recovered from that. So now I wasn't up to speed. And I was sent as Telstar pilot. So what Telstar is, we get airborne and we relay the messages for the Mirages that are going in low level because with the VHF radio, as you know, as line of sight, so they couldn't speak to the radar on the pilot controllers. We were relayed. That was the June, July, August, somewhere around there. We got home, everything was going well, and suddenly we were put onto a 24-hour standby. And beginning of September 1987, we got the call up to go. And it was literally overnight. We jumped in the jets because the whole squadron deploys. We take all our ground crew back, equipment, everything with us. And we were deployed to Air Force Base Rundu. Myself and Mark Raymond arrived late. When I say late, I'm saying half past 5, 6 in the evening. And it was already dark. And Rundu doesn't have the facilities for night flying. So we got ourselves in there under very hairy conditions and landed and got out the aircraft. And the boss was saying to us, they thought we there for an air show the following morning. They didn't even know we were coming. This is how fast everything had happened. From there, we went on to cockpit standby because what was happening during Ops, Modular, Hoop, and Dakar, those were the three that ran concurrently over 87 and 88, was the big fight over a little airfield called Mavinga. And Mavinga was the last or a springboard that the Angolans needed to get to Jonas Savimbi and his Unita forces in the southeast corner of Angola. And if they'd lost that airfield, they could have launched all their operations from that airfield and went and sorted Savimbi out. So our whole purpose was to stop the Angolans, with ultimately the Cubans and the Russians that we involved later on, from taking that airfield. So now, during the day, the troops are being shot at by MiGs from Quito Carnivale, and we had to try and intercept these MiGs or keep the airspace above our troops clear so that they could actually move freely during the day. And 10 days before my incident, we were scrambled to go and intercept 2 MiGs. Now you've got to understand it's 130 miles from where we were based. Even at 10 miles a minute, which is the speed we were running in it, it's still 13 minutes of flying time to get there. The big issue was the MiGs were only 5 minutes away from the base. So by the time we got there, they'd already thrown their bombs at our troops and gone home already. So we'd have to turn around and come back home and waste a lot of fuel, a lot of time, and a lot of effort, and a lot of frustration. So the only way we could get this sorted out, now I don't know whose idea it was, but we were told that 2 of our reconnaissance troops were sent to Quito. They were planted on top of a little hill outside Quito airfield with a pair of binoculars and a radio. And as those pilots walked out to the aircraft, we were scrambled. That was to try and cut down on intercept time. Those pilots could have been going for normal training sorties. They could have been flying to another airbase, or they could be going to the combat zone. We didn't know at the time. Back at Rundu, we were sitting on the threshold of the runway in a tent. Now, you know the temperatures are running there from 35 up to 40 degrees Celsius, and it's hot. And our ground crew eventually nicknamed the tent called Little Siberia, because they had the go-karts parked out in the corners there. Initially, there was no covering around them, so they had to go put coverings around them, and it was really harsh conditions. And now you've got a base that's got 3,000 people on, that's not geared for it. The people started picking up serious jipper guts from the food and the hygiene and all the other things. To such a degree, we were living off Coke and dry bread at one stage to try and stop all these issues. Sunday, the 27th of September, 1987. I'll probably never forget it. I mean, I like to say that's my new birthday. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We were sun tanning in Little Siberia, minding our own business. And what happens is they normally put you onto a 6-hour standby, and then a 4-hour standby, and then a 2-hour standby. And so they would upgrade you until you end up 10 minutes before the time, And then you would go into a cockpit standby, whereby you would be sitting in the cockpit strapped in with everything ready to go except the engine running. They even plug an external power plant in to keep us going. And this afternoon, the little field telephone rang, and because of all the scrambling we'd done previously, you sort of half raise an eyebrow thinking, okay, now what? And our squadron OC, General Carlo Goggiano, okay, he was commandant at that time. Yes, yes, yes on the telephone. Next, he put the phone down and he screamed, scramble. And the letter I was writing went flowing to one side. We jumped in the cockpit, and literally 3 minutes later, we were screaming down the runway in the heat, 3:30 in the afternoon. Now, I'm convinced to this day, the only reason we got airborne in that heat and that short runway was because the Earth's curved. We actually flew off the curvature of the Earth. There was no other way of getting airborne at that stage. You sort of half knaap your boutjie, Sabiki, when you clear the fence on the other side. It was that close. And we would turn out left, head north, low level. It was all pre-planned. The radar would be doing dead reckoning and following us. And then at a certain point, they would call us to pitch. We'd pitch to altitude, level off. And I don't know where it came from, but there was this song by this rock group called Twisted Sister. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. And it says, we're not going to take it. And that was the song pounding through my head the whole way out there. And it was amazing because I think I heard the song once before. But anyway, next thing we got the pitch up call. We pitched up to 30,000 feet. We had to level off there because of all the missiles on the ground. And the next thing, the rugby comment, the fighter controller started sounding like the great old late Gerrit Bouvier when he's doing his rugby. He got so excited you could hardly hear the man's breathing. And he was calling it the MiG. And the next thing the general said, okay, jettison the fuel tanks. And that's something you never train. You don't throw away your fuel tanks under training. So I looked at him and I thought to myself, are you serious? And the next thing, his fuel tank fell away from the belly of his aeroplane. I thought, he's serious. So I hit the jettison button, slammed the thing into afterburner, and it was like releasing this horse cart that had a ton of bricks on it, and suddenly it was empty. This Mirage took off. The interception came. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that there is my story. There will be his story. There will be the commandant's story. And somewhere in between is the truth. And I'm going to give you my story and my version. I seen the MiG at about 2-3 miles ahead of us from my 11 o'clock position. And it came through the formation about 1,000 foot lower than us. And they were flying in a wingman position. And we know that the Cubans are normally taught to fly that way, or definitely the Angolans. The Cubans tend to actually fly that way until they get to a certain point and then they separate. If we were dealing with anybody else, the East Germans or ever who else was in the country at the time, they probably wouldn't be. They'll be in a normal battle formation. I don't know. I seen them. The commandant didn't, or the squadron leader didn't. So as they flashed through, I called it interception. For 10 years, you're training to go into combat. And the 45 seconds that I want to remember the most, I can't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I see a MiG coming towards me. He's turning slightly left. I'm turning slightly right. And I thought, okay, none of us have got head-on capable missiles. So I'm going to do something illegal. I'm going to actually shoot at him with the cannons head-on. We're not encouraged to do that because if the aircraft does explode, you're going to be flying through debris. But I mean, we're in war now, we're not in training. And as I flicked the trigger guard over, there was a bright orange flash of the left wing of the MiG-23. And the next thing, this solid white telephone pole came hurtling at me. I call it a telephone pole. It was that big you could see it clearly. The problem being, for me, it was corkscrewing. So now I don't know, is it going to go over me? Is it going to go under me? Is it going to go left? Is it going to go right? And your first instinct is to break away from this missile. And then you said, no, your training says go towards it, because if you turn your tail to it, you're showing it a very infrared signature. So I got back towards it. Now you must understand, I'm doing 480 knots. I don't know what speed the MiG's doing. The missile's a Mach 2 missile in between us. So times are a little few and tight. Temporal distortion kicks in, whereby everything seems to be in slow motion. The missile corkscrewed over the right-hand wing, disappeared behind the aircraft. I was watching it go past. And the next thing I hear this light thud, or I feel this light thud, and you hear this light bang in the background. You know, when you're reversing out the driveway of the car and somebody just smacks the car to frighten you a little bit. That's the kind of sensation I look at. And of course, the movies all precondition you that when the missile explodes, the aircraft explodes and everything's just pieces. So you wait for the explosion. And suddenly you realize nothing's happened. Okay, I better carry on flying this aircraft. The next thing, then the MiG's over the top of the roof. I scan all the gauges. I don't see any problems. I jump on the radio and I said, Cutty, I think I've been hit by a missile. I'm not sure. He says to me, okay, let's go home. One of the few times there was no need to give me a second invitation. I took the first one gratefully. I rolled the aircraft onto its back, pointed the nose at the ground, and set sail for the dirt, because safety was now at low level. Marcel Dassault, the manufacturers of the F1, have a restriction placed on us that you will not fly supersonic with your nose more than 30 degrees below the horizon. That was a limitation placed written in the manual of the books. I've now decided I should actually write Marcel Dassault a letter and saying, gentlemen, from practical experiences, I will now clear your aircraft, supersonic, 90-degree nose down. But there must be one provision. Please allow enough space at the bottom for the pull-out. Because this is where I got my first fright. When I thought, okay, now it's time to pull out, I grabbed the stick and I pulled it into my stomach. And the aircraft changed attitude, but not direction. I don't know if that makes sense. So it went from absolutely nose down to flat on its belly. And it was just kept going down, 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 down. And where does humor come from in a time like this? And while I'm waiting for this aircraft, the first thing that goes through my mind is the old roadrunner and the coyote that are having a go at each other. And of course, the poor coyote gets bashed off the cliff. And you see him fall down the cliff and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually, he hits a deck. And the next scene is, he has the shape of the coyote in the ground. He gets out of the hole, dusts himself off to fight another day to go catch this roadrunner. Now, I could see the shape of a Mirage F1 CZ in the Angolan territory when I smacked the deck there. And I just hung on. I mean, there was nothing else you could do. And my mask was sliding off my face. I started biting on the nose piece to stop it falling off. And literally about 100, 150 feet above the deck, the aircraft stopped and shot forward. And I thought, made it. Head south, because now that's where base is. Where Rundu would be, we'll worry about it much later, because now we're trying to get away. While I'm low level, I get this audio warning in my ears from a radar. Now the Mirage, the F1 had a relatively primitive radar warning receiver in that could tell you somebody was looking at you with a radar. You get a sort of a click, 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 click in the ears, and you got little arrows on the dashboard, one directly behind you, one to the left, one to the right, one forward. And any combination of those four would then tell you roughly where the direction of the radar is. And I got this directly from my 6 o'clock. And I said to the boss on the radio, listen, yeah, I'm on the deck and I've got this radar behind me. Is it the MiG following me? Is it the same 6s on the ground? Is it the ZU-23, radar-controlled anti-aircraft guns. I don't know. The system is not that accurate to be able to tell us what's going on. So he said to me, you know the back drill. And the rule is get as low as possible, as fast as possible, and don't turn around to see what's going on behind you. So the reason for that is any missile that you see launched, it normally falls away from the aircraft first before it fires. And if you're too close to the ground, it's going to smack the trees or something before it's launched properly. You've got a lot of infrared signature from the Earth, which should confuse the missile to a certain degree. The faster you go, the less chance you have of him catching up to you to get within a decent firing range. And of course, if you're turning, you allow him to cut the corner and close the gap as well. Again, the same Coyote Roadrunner things popped in my head. I said to the boss man, I'm so low and so fast that I'm scared I look like this little Roadrunner kicking up the dust cloud over the dunes. And when you see him running all over the thing. And he probably had to look around and said, well, I can't see anything. So I said, well, in that case, I'm not low enough. And I pushed this thing down. Now we're doing 700 odd knots. The Blackout limited low level is 750, not to be exceeded. Very close to the sound barrier, if not through the sound barrier. Literally 50 feet above the deck. Up until now, not a single warning on the panel. Aircraft's flying perfectly. Everything is functioning the way it should. When all of a sudden I get an emergency fuel pump warning, poof, on the panel. Now you're flying in the choppers. I don't know if you have the same system, but on the warning panel you got red and orange emergencies. The red emergencies are the ones you know off by heart. The orange emergencies, you have time to pick out the panic book and read off the emergency and go through what you're doing. So this is now red emergency fuel pump failure. One spent hours and hours and hours in a simulator. And now I can see why. When I bent down to start doing the switches, to me they'd already been done. I don't remember doing them. And I'm like to believe that it's the training kept in. While I'm busy doing that, I think to myself, all right, listen, I'm too close to the ground, too fast to start looking at panic books now, because the next thing that popped up was hydraulic 2 system failure. Now, that's not critical. The F1's got 2 systems, a primary and a secondary, and they're identical, except for nose wheel steering. So once you land it, you can't steer the aircraft with the nose wheel. Minor crisis in my books at that stage. So I said to the boss, don't you want to read the emergencies for me from the panic book and then let me just concentrate on flying the airplane? He says, no, fine. So we read off all the emergencies. By now, we're looking at 5-6 minutes of flying time. At 700 knots, we're really going south very quickly. He said to me, by the way, where are you? I said, I have no clue. 50 feet above the ground, doing 700 knots. That's where I'm heading south. He said, all right, we're out of the combat zone. There's no ways the MiGs can follow us and we still get on with fuel. I want you to pitch the altitude so that we can get the radar guys to get us together and we can assess the damage on your airplane. So we pitched about 15,000, 20,000 feet at that stage. Radar got the boss to me. He slotted into my left wing, said, right, where's the damage? I said, it should all be on the right-hand side of the aircraft. And I remember seeing him slot his aircraft around, come up the other side. And my mind said to me at this stage, now what's going to happen? And I remember him saying to me, you want the good news or the bad news? Again, the humor coming out. We designed for it. I said, all right, give me the bad news because then the good news will cheer me up. All right, bad news is your drag chute's missing. So the drag chute on the F1 that stops us on the runway got shot off. It's gone. With hindsight, or later on, they seen the parachute. The pilot had ejected according to them. And I think they're still trying to find a little midget because that's a very, very small parachute. And I'm sure they haven't found him yet, but they're still looking. Anyway. Okay, so no drag chute. Not a problem. light aircraft, we can land it on 7,500 feet. We must just control our speed carefully. Next thing he says, you're leaking fuel like a sieve. How much fuel have you got on board the aircraft? So I looked down at the gauges, and in total was 1,570 liters. Now, the Vlamgatte, we know anything from 350 liters a minute at sea level in full afterburner to 33 liters a minute cruising at altitude at 8 miles a minute. So we are now at 20,000 feet, somewhere in between. So let's halve that. We've got roughly 10, 15 minutes flying time of fuel on board. While all these calculations are being done, the next thing, 500 liter warning light comes on. There's only 500 liters of fuel left in this airplane. And we think, oh, jeepers. That's not good. So somewhere the leak is between the gauge and the engine, or wherever. The whole time while we're doing this, I'm getting an audio warning in my ears and I can't see anything on the panel. And it's like a ton of bucket of ice cold water being thrown over you when you realize you've got an oil failure coming. It does the same thing in the simulator. The audio comes on before the actual light comes on. Now, with the failure of the oil, you lose your throttle because it's all oil controlled. The nozzle flaps on the back of the jet that open and close and control your power, they open up and they throw away 35-40% of all the power that you've got. You have to switch onto a little thing called an emergency regulator. There's a little toggle switch on the left-hand side, which is electric. Luckily, by now, we were over the border back in Southwest Africa, or Namibia, and there was wind right below us for some strange reason. Maybe the fire controllers were unknowingly directing us to the right direction. So I said to him, okay, with the pending oil failure, what I'm going to do is put this aircraft into a practice force landing position so that should the engine stop, we'll be able to make the runway. Not once throughout the entire episode did we discuss ejection. Not once. Because up until then, the wheels went down normally with hydraulics, the flaps went down normal, the air brake was working. As I said, the only thing I didn't have, to my knowledge, was the nose wheel steering. So anyway, now suddenly you're on this emergency regulator and you've got to blip it a few times, and you wait for the engine to spool up, and you think, oh shucks, too much. Then you blip it back, wait for the engine to wind down, oh shucks, too much again. And so you're hunting non-stop. You can't find a happy medium with the aircraft. They started lengthening the runway when we arrived there. So it was an extra 1,000 feet, which they had graded, compacted, and sprayed with tar just to keep the dust down. And I still remember saying to the boss, I'm going to use that extra 1,000 feet and land this aircraft short of the threshold. Not having the full control over the aircraft on finals, I didn't want the speed to drop too low because not having the nozzle flaps, we won't be able to have enough power to pick the aircraft up. So I had an extra 5 or 10 knots, what I thought was 5 or 10 knots, to the speed of the aircraft, and I came in for the landing. Naturally, with that extra speed, we missed the runway, the initial section, and I landed on the actual threshold of the existing runway. And I still remember patting myself on the back saying, Arthur, well done. You got this machine on. And I jumped on the brakes to slow the aircraft down. Now I know there's no drag chute. And the only thing that happened when I hit the brakes was the expression on my face changed. It went from a smile and a pat on the back to one of those Charlie Brown zigzag smiles that you get. Oh, shucks, nothing's happening. This aircraft is not slowing down. So now I want to pull the nose up for aerodynamic braking, and it wants to get airborne. So it's back on the ground, back on the brakes. At 7,500 feet, when you're coming in at 300 km an hour or 150, 160 knots, is not long. So now you start going through all your procedures again, and you think, okay, there's that sandpit at the end of the runway. That should stop me. When I went over the threshold markers on the far side of the runway, we were still doing 100 odd plus knots. And I grabbed the emergency handbrake and I pulled it. And again, to my mind, nothing happened. So we went into the sand, went through that sand like a hot knife through butter. It had rained or drizzled a few days earlier on, and that drizzle had compacted the sand. Naturally, there was no safety barrier on the runway at the time. So through the sand, down an embankment, and the next thing, here comes the security fence. First thing goes to my mind, questions by the Board of Inquiry. Who gave you permission to go AWOL with a 55 million rand aeroplane? And that was the biggest concern I had at the time. Then I suddenly realized, oh, there's a river at the end of Rundu there. Now this river is a little trickle. I mean, it's really nothing worth talking about. I said, I could just see myself in this river, drowning myself, because I don't have a dinghy in my seat. I've got a land pack with a rifle and a couple of cans of water and rations. And I then picked my hands up to put them in front of my face while all this was going through my head. And there was this loud bang when we went through the fence. I felt silk hit me in the face. And the next thing I woke up, I was lying in the sand on my right-hand side. And I started looking around me. And I realized I'd actually fallen in front of the aeroplane by between 80 and 100 meters. Now, the ejection seat is tilted 5 degrees backwards. You're supposed to end up behind the aeroplane, not in front of it. Again, with hindsight later on, the ejection took place while the aircraft was deaccelerating. Because what had set the seat off was the left-hand undercarriage had hit a rock, the nose wheel had collapsed underneath the aeroplane, and the nose had hit the ground. So it was assumed that while all this was happening, the ejection took place. And I was like, you weet die Afrikaners het 'n stukkie clay laat. You know that stick with a piece of clay on the end. And I was just flung forward, not up where I was supposed to be. So when I started looking around me, I threw my head backwards. And now I'm lying on my side with my head facing the aeroplane, my feet away from the aeroplane. And when I looked at the aeroplane, I seen the nose pointing straight at me. And there was a fire on the left-hand intake. And I know there's 100 rounds of 30 millimeter high explosive ammunition underneath that fire. The aircraft's pointed straight at me. Headlines in the local newspaper. Pilot gets shot by his own aeroplane. So the fire brigade arrived. I said, nobody touches me till the doctor gets here. Go and sort that fire out first. I must have passed out some other time during this, because the next thing I remember is Gagiana was standing next to me, and two of my colleagues who were in the air with me at the time. And there's a brilliant book coming out now at the end of this year, written by Neil Reed, about the Bush War. And he's got everything really, really down to a fine art in this book. So I would recommend it when it comes out for everybody to grab a copy. The funny thing about it is, the Thursday, and this was Sunday, the Thursday night I was in the pub having a beer with all my mates, standing next to the boss chatting, when suddenly somebody sticks their head into the bar. Arthur Piercy, there's a telephone call for you. Now, who the hell phones you up on the border? Because those were the days of the klein slinger telephone and the exchange board and all the other good things. I thought, yes, this is weird. Now go around the corner into the phone booth. It's dark. You can't see. Hello, hello. My mother on the phone. I said, Ma, how did you get through? No, I found you did that. I said, well, why are you phoning me? What's wrong? She says, no, your father's ended up in hospital. He suffers from a thing called Bell's palsy. You know, you lose the nerve in the neck and you get paralyzed in the face. And I said, oh, geez, how bad is it? No, he's discharged already. I speak to him on the phone. I just thought we'd let you know. So I spoke to him in a bit of a slur, as if he had a little bit too much to drink. So I said to him, "Do you want me to come home?" No, it's not necessary. I said, "Okay, you've just moved to Richards Bay from Pretoria. Give me your new telephone number and your new physical address." And I wrote them down in a piece of paper that I had in my flying overalls pocket in the dark. Put the paper into my overalls pocket, went back into the pub, stood next to Gagiana, had another beer, and off we went. Now, if I'd mentioned my parents were sick or something was wrong at home, it's almost a policy that if you're not 100% with it, you go home. You don't go and fight the next day. So if I had mentioned it, I probably would have been home on the first flight on Friday morning. But be that, I said nothing. The next morning, I walked into the ops room the Friday morning. I gave the piece of paper without even reading it to the ops clerk, and I said to him, "Should anything happen, these are my new contact details." Lo and behold, that Sunday, I need them. And they're in my memory. I can remember every single thing I wrote down in the dark on that piece of paper, just for that split second. Don't know what it was 15 minutes later. Anyway, I asked the doctor for a morphine injection because my left arm had broken in the fall. And I was still strapped to the parachute, to the ejection seat. And they were fumbling around me, and I said to me, guys, we're not going to use the seat anymore. Cut the damn straps of the seat to get me out of it. My legs wouldn't move then already. I suspected the ejection seat was weighing it down. But in the meantime, I asked for a morphine injection for the arm and the pain. The doctors gave me one apparently. 2 minutes later, I was complaining again. Gave me a second one. And when I asked for the third one, they said, whoa, you're going to kill the man if you give him too much of this morphine. They put me onto the stretcher. As they pushed me to the back of the Unimog ambulance, I passed out. I woke up in one more hospital 10 days later. Now, what had happened there was they took me straight to Rundu's hospital. There they assessed and found out that I'd dislocated my neck at the C6 and 7th level. I had a left lung that collapsed, and they had to casevac me 10 o'clock that night. The pilot and the navigator of the C-130 were in a bit of an argument as to what level they were to fly at to get me home. The navigator said he wanted me at flight level 450 or something like that, ridiculous, because there's jet streams up there and they'll get home faster. And the pilot said to him, we can't fly that altitude. If we decompress, we're going to lose the pilot in the back. The navigator took one look at him and said, Captain, if we don't fly that altitude, that pilot's going to die in the back in any case. And we all know how much damn paperwork it is involved if he does die on board the airplane. So you better get there as fast as possible. And I'm speaking under correction. To this day, I believe they hold the record between Rundu and Waterkloof as the fastest. They even beat the Flummies because of those jet streams. 1 o'clock the next morning, 2 o'clock the next morning, I was in One Mile Hospital. The doctors held me in induced coma for 10 days because they said if I'd been awake, I would never have been able to handle the stress. Only from the fall in the sand, my body was twice my size. They were worried about brain swelling and a possibility of mental illness or mental capacity. And I had a ton of dreams, hallucinations, if you want to call it, in those 10 days. And you're probably not going to believe this, but not a single one of them had anything to do with the accident. It was all hospital-based. And when I woke up this morning, or when they brought me out of the induced coma, there was a short little red-haired nurse standing next to me. Her name was Sally Bingham. She said to me, Arthur, how are you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling fine. I want a glass of orange juice and bring the wheelchair. I want to go home. She said to me, Arthur, you're a little sick, so we can't send you home yet. Plus, you might need an operation, so we can't give you anything to drink, but here's a piece of ice to suck. And that was a fatal mistake. Well, not quite fatal, but it was definitely a mistake. I was addicted to ice for the next 60 days. If my eyes open, I want ice to suck on. I had the staff running around trying to find this slush puppy stuff that they buy in the movies, because that's what I want to suck on. Because they had me on a feeding drip, I was never hungry, but the throat, because of the collapsed lung, they put me on a ventilator. And now the ventilator is breathing to supply your body with sufficient oxygen. But because there's only one lung, it's breathing faster than what you wanted. Now, your fitness level says that you're supposed to breathe X and the machine's breathing Y. And suddenly you're in conflict with this machine. When you want to breathe in, it wants to exhale. So it just sucks the air out of your lungs. When you want to exhale, it wants to inhale, so it just fills you up. And sucking on the ice took my mind off of that. And I managed to get to the base of the machine. I had a halo around my head with a 2 or 3 kilogram weight on the end to try and stretch the neck. They couldn't do any operations on me until the swelling had all gone down. So I spent a total of 65 days in hospital. I had 5 or 6 operations, one on the arm, one on the hip, one on the neck. Oh, I developed a stomach ulcer for the stress while I was in the induced coma. They had to operate, patch it up, and then re-operate it again 3 days later because it burst again. So this is all I pick up afterwards. Somebody said to me, Arthur, why did you ask for the wheelchair? And I don't know if the good Lord had said to me, Arthur, I need you there for a reason, so please don't fight this one. And everything was revolved around the wheelchair from there onwards. We even had a discussion one day about how they're going to get me home. And I had planks at the back of my dad's bucky that they can push me up put me on the back of the bucky. They must just put goggles on me when we go home so the wind doesn't blow me in the eyes. And these were all the things that I was trying to come up with. I was being a real MacGyver at that stage, just so that I could go home. So 65 days ICU, they then pushed me up into the ward. Like I said, the accident happened on the 27th of September. That December, for Christmas, was the first time I left the hospital. But now, while I'm in the ICU ward, you've got all these people running around you non-stop. In walks a psychologist. And he introduces himself. He's Lieutenant so-and-so. He's from the psychology department. I said to him, well, I can't remember the exact words, but what it boiled down to is, there's the door, please leave. It's not my mind that got hurt, it's my body. So I need a doctor or orthopedic surgeon or somebody to fix the body. And then everything will be okay. He said, no, I just want to chat. I said, well, you sit down and talk, I'll listen. You've got to understand with the trachea as well in the neck, there's no airflow going over the vocal cords, so you can't speak. So everything is done. Lip reading, alphabet boards where they put a pen in your mouth and they wheel this alphabet board up and down. And as you get to the letter, so you blink and so you write down what you want. So the more he talks, the more I listen, the better it is for me. I remember having an itch on the top of my head here, which I wanted him to scratch. Because now I couldn't move a muscle from my chin down. I lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling. By the time I got him to scratch my head with this alphabet board, the itch had gone. And we'd wasted 2 hours in the process, this poor sister's time, trying to get rid of this itch that eventually took itself away. And then another time, every 4 hours they had to come in and suction all the gunk out of the lungs because of the collapse. So what the physiotherapist would do would put a nebulizing fluid into the trachea. They would loosen all the phlegm in the lungs. She would then pat you on the chest and get everything loose, and then she would disconnect the breathing machine and stick a vacuum down there to suck it all out. Now the poor girl doesn't think about me And I say this with respect to her. She just pulls it off. Now, she doesn't wait till I inhale or the machine inhales for me. She happens to pull it off as it exhales. Now, while she's busy sucking you, you desperately, urgently need oxygen. And there's nothing coming. And I think, Bliksem, if I die on this table, I'm going to haunt you for the rest of your life. So anyway, she plugs it back on again and she carries on patting some more. And there's this continuous beep, beep, beep in the background from the heart monitor. And the next thing, this heart monitor flatlines while she's busy beating me on the chest. And the first thought went through my mind, okay, I'm dying. That's why it's flatlined. And she carries on as if nothing's happened. And I'm expecting you to run around and cold blue like they do in the hospitals and bring out those panels and shock the living daylights out of me in the process. And she just carries on packing away. And I said, woman, in my mind, I said, woman, I'm really going to haunt you if I don't make this one. And the next thing goes, beep, beep, beep. And things went on. What had happened is while she was patting me on the chest, she dislocated one of the leads. And that's why the thing flatlined. But it frightened the living daylights out of me. You know, I thought I'd really died for a couple of seconds there. But anyway, so the rehab was tough. But humor was the one thing that dragged me through it. You always have to try and find the bright side to everything. And even to this day, I think most of the disabled people I'm in contact with have the wickedest, darkest, driest sense of humor I've ever heard. And only we can get away with it. If somebody else does it, doesn't know what they're talking about, it's almost an insult. So when I got back home, they said, okay, now you must go home and do catch up on your rehab there. I said, why must I sit at home? I need to get back to work. No, there's no need for you to go. I said, I want to get back to work. So how are you going to do that? I said, well, the Air Force will come fetch me. So I picked up the phone and I started making a few phone calls. Cut a long story short, they eventually created a route, a duty bus route in my area that pick up everybody staying in the area, load me and take me to work, and then bring me home in the afternoons. And the Air Force was absolutely amazing, I'm telling you. The loading in and out of the bus was very difficult. So with a bunch of the mechanics and the engineers on the base, they came up with this seat in the back of a high-ass bucky. They turned it sideways in the boot so that you're sitting with your back against the one wall, and the door would then open up on your left-hand side. And it's on two long poles underneath all the seat, so they can pull the seat out, pick me up out of the wheelchair, put me into the seat, and push me back into the high-ass, and off to work we'd go. 5 o'clock, we come home. And this went on and on. And it was great to be back at work. Yes, I probably wasn't strong enough to be there, but I was in amongst the mates. I was in amongst the smell of the jet fuel. I know you think we're wasting your jet fuel, you chopper pilots, but I'll let you get away with it this time. Because that was just the smell of money. And, you know, it was an awesome smell. Not to mention the noise and the laughter and the guys training. And it was just awesome being back at work. It was really more of a rehab being back at work than staying at home. Before I left for the border, I'd asked the young lady to marry me. And we'd had the ring made, everything. But before we could have this engagement party, we shot off. Now I came back a different person. Physically, not mentally, physically. So while I was in hospital, you know, you've got many, many hours to lie and stare at the ceiling and think what you want to do. You say to yourself, all right, is it really fair on this young lady that she hang around? So I asked the nurses and the doctors and the psychologists and the lawyers and everybody I could possibly think of to brief this poor girl, to say to her, listen, if you walk out now, nobody's going to bat an eyelid. But these are the hardships you're going to go through. Okay? And at the time, she made the decision to stay. which was great. It was fantastic. I was thrilled. We actually got engaged in the ICU ward. We had flowers, we had alcohol, we had champagne. There was about 20 people in the ward, in the cubicle. So we broke every single rule in the book that day just to get engaged. And then 6 months later, I think reality kicked in. And she decided she's not going to hang around much longer. So she left. Initially, I was beheaded because why waste my time for 6 months was how I felt. But I'm going to defend her move and say she did me a favor. Because I was now at home, I wasn't doing anything. There was no need for me to do anything. I had a caregiver, and she was around helping me get dressed and eat and all the necessary things. And now suddenly she's not there anymore. Now what am I going to do? Jeepers. I phoned my mother and said, help, please. So she pitched up there with her suitcase. She said she's going to move in. I said, okay, fine. 2 weeks later, I said, Ma, will you please go home? Why? I said, you're not letting me try anything for myself. But I am. I said, 5 seconds or 10 seconds of waiting is not long enough. You've got to leave me alone. So just do yourself a favor, phone Dad, tell him to come fetch you. Oh, you don't love me anymore. I said, listen, it's because I love you. I don't want to destroy this relationship now. So just go home and let me sort myself out. The Air Force organized me a Red Cross nurse that would come at 6 in the evening and leave at 6 in the morning when I was at home, because the rest of the time I was at work. 3 weeks later, I had my car modified with hand controls ready for driving. And I actually drove myself. The first day I drove myself to work, I had an accident. I hit a police car. I stopped at the robot or the intersection, and it was on the off-ramp coming off the freeway, right there outside of Waterkloof. And he was busy directing traffic. And on the left-hand side, he parked his private vehicle while he was directing the traffic. And when he turned around and he said to me, please come, with the hand controls I've got, you pull it down towards your knee for petrol, and you push it into the dashboard for brake. So it's one single lever. And as I pulled away from it, my stomach went into spasm. My knee shot up and it pinned my hand and the hand controls against the steering wheel. And yeah, I'm doing about 4 or 5 k's an hour, going around the corner, going towards this cop car, and I can't turn the steering wheel because the knee spins this thing. I can't release, I can't brake, I can't do anything. And yet I ricochet off this guy's side of his motor car, and I'm halfway up the street before I get myself free enough to stop the car. All I see in my rearview mirror is the poor man takes his hat off. He flings it over the barrier and he runs after me. Eventually, I put the car into reverse. I reversed my car all the way back to where he is. And I said to him, I'm terribly sorry. This is an issue I had. Just here's my name, here's my number, here's my rank. I work here at 3 Scotland Waterkloof. Go and have your car repaired. I will fix everything. Yeah, but it's a brand new car and he had it a week. I said, yes, I'm really, really apologizing. But you know, it was just an uncontrollable situation. Now I'm trying to keep this quiet. Lo and behold, the guy goes to the squadron and he asks to make sure that I actually work there. So when I pitched up and worked the next morning, the first thing the boss says to me, Arthur, have you hit any police cars lately? I said, where did you find out? He says, no, the police was here to go make sure you actually work here. So I said, well, okay, this is the accident I had. And he went and reported it to the police. I didn't. So the next thing in the post, I get this letter saying, because you were involved in an accident, kindly produce your driver's license and date of issue. And I thought, I haven't converted my normal driver's license into one for a person with a disability. So now what am I going to do? So I thought, okay, I'll take a shot in the dark. I filled in my details that I got when I was at high school with my driver's license and I sent it in. I don't know if they were lenient or he failed to mention I was disabled, but it went through. So there was no repercussions from that. I hope the policeman's not listening to this podcast. Otherwise, you'll know where to get hold of me and catch up with. So, since then, I've got involved in scuba diving for the disabled. I did a half an August cycle doing a hand cycle that you pedal with your arms. I was unsuccessful there because I was unfit. And I thought it was a failure of not being able to complete this August. Unbeknowingly, all the training I'd done, I'd built up muscles that I would never have normally had or would never have developed had I not gone into the gym and practiced the cycling. Flying is in the blood. I mean, you can vouch for it. Once you're infected, it's incurable. And I still wanted to fly. I was sitting at the squadron, reading through a Flight International magazine, and there was an article of a British guy in an electric wheelchair, having an aircraft specially built for him, and he passed to medical in the RAF. And I thought, hey, what's going on here? Because I honestly thought flying was out of the question. In those days, the disabled were not nearly as adventurous or were allowed to be as adventurous as they are nowadays. And I immediately picked up the phone. I phoned the Institute of Aviation Medicine. I spoke to Elsie at the reception there. Yes, Major, how's it going? What's going on? I said, no, I'd like to book my annual flying medical, please. She said, certainly, when would you like to be here? I said, April, such and such a date. She said, okay, booked. I phoned my mother. I said, would you like to go for the outing? I'm going to have a flying medical done. She said, you're going to do what? I said, I'm going to have a flying medical done. Okay, I've got to see this. Let's go. We couldn't even get into the building. There were 2 steps. I had to get the security guard to drag me. Got to the counter now. You're like Kilroy. You know that counter's quite high there at the Institute. Oh, hello, Captain. What you doing? I said, up for my flying medical. She didn't ask why. She said, okay. Bends down, grabs my file, says, it's been a while. You need to do an ECG and an EEG. I said, okay, fine, thank you. Now, please phone upstairs. I want 4 national servicemen to come down and carry me up the stairs because there's no lift in the building. She phones. Down they come, carry me up. The first one I get to is the lung function. Now, with the collapsed lung and my diaphragm that's not working, I took one look at my mother and I said, I hope you brought clean clothes with because I'm going to have to blow very hard here. Pulls the chair out of the way. He says, the pectoral, breathe in, breathe out, go. 84% lung function. And I thought, jeepers, how sick do you have to be to fail this medical? But anyway, I'm not going to ask for a second opinion. I'm going to take his and go. Got to the eye. The eye people did the same thing there. They didn't ask questions. So I went through the entire thing, even the audio. The lady was pregnant. We had to get 2 of the pilots, the commercial pilots, waiting in the passage to pick me up into the audio room. The first person to question my being there was a young lieutenant doctor who had to do my physical. Why are you here? Now you're for flying medical. But you can't walk. I said, hallelujah. Somebody's finally noticed in this building. I said, but wait a minute. I might not be able to walk, but I've got a car downstairs that's got hand controls in, and I drove it here today. So now, I need you to look at that piece of paper in front of you, and you need to tell me, is there a medical reason why I can't be in the air? The practical one, I will try and solve myself. He says, I can't sign this. I said, why not? He says, because you're not G1, A1, K1. Because you can't do squats and all sorts of other things that we're supposed to test you to get your heart rate up. See, if you want my heart rate up, bring a bicycle in here and I'll pedal with my arms and get the heart rate up as high as you want it. No. It's not going to happen. So I said, well, listen. And there, that day I learned a little life motto. Never take a no from somebody who is not authorized to say yes in the first place. This young lieutenant was not there. He was not allowed to say yes. He's just doing his job. The fact says no, so it's no. So I said, fine, who can authorize this? Then I will have to take it to the 2IC of the Institute. I said, well, come, let's go see him. No, you don't understand. You've got to make an appointment with him. So I said, well, let's make an appointment with him. And I then went through a 6-month period of exercising and training. And one of the things was to be able to get in and out of the aircraft unassisted, the civilian aircraft. And I never had the strength to do that, was to get in and out of the aeroplane. This was all done before my August cycle tour. So after the August, when I went back, now with all the exercising, despite the fact that I'd failed on that mission, I now developed sufficient power to allow me to get onto the wing of a Cherokee and into the cockpit. I was dragging my bum and legs all over the place. So that failure wasn't actually a failure. It was a stepping stone to something. So, I always try and tell people, you might fail now, but it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up again. And I had a guru come and chat to me one day, and he said to me, Arthur, it's like a torpedo in the water. So what do you mean, put? He says, they fire the torpedo in the water. Now the torpedo searches and searches and searches, and then it locks on and it starts tracking the target. If the target moves, it realizes, hey, I've made a mistake. Realign, readjust, recalculate. Carries on again. I said, oh, that sounds like an ATM missile. He says, there we go. That's it. So that's what life is now. It's an ATM missile. Acquire the target, make sure you're within the right parameters initially, and fire the missile. If it's not the right parameters, make the adjustment. Fire again. If it's not the right parameters, make the adjustment, fire again. If you then run out of missiles, it's not the end of the mission. Come home, regroup, go back again and fight another day. And this is the attitude I've been taking in life with anything and everything I've been doing. And that's what keeps me going every day. So then we bought an aircraft, a kit in America. Had it imported into the country, and now we're going to build it. We are going to assemble it and modify it at the same time. I now got my medical aid, my flying medical done, and we started building this in my 2-car garage. How do you fit a 35-foot wingspan into a 2-car garage? I think I must have had a clunk on my head because my mathematics was wrong. I was convinced I could build it in the garage, and I couldn't. So we started. There's an aircraft called a Sea-Wind. It's a 4-place amphibian aircraft. And my goal with this aircraft was to get into the thing and fly. And I know if I keep going in the same direction, east or west, I will get home again, because I'm not a member of the Flat Earth Society. The Earth is round. So I will get back to where I go. So we've started building, but life happens. The missiles are not always hitting the target. My father, who was the chief builder on the project, passed away 6 or 7 years ago. And where do you find somebody that can assist you to build an airplane for free? Because it's very, very time consuming. So it's lying in a hangar at Bradford Airfield. And hopefully one day I'll get it finished and we can go and do this magnificent trip and fly around the world. And just to show people, it's in the mind. Everything's in the mind. If there's a will to do it, you will achieve it. So that's my story in a nutcase. I've got a whole bunch of other quirks and times, but I'm sure we can keep it for another opportunity. Maybe I spoke too much for the poor listeners now, and they don't want to hear my voice squeaking and crackling on any further. So be it. But Fossi, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for sitting listening to me. And to Chris Kotzer and company, we appreciate what he's doing and the fact that he's capturing all this information in video and sound and audio for prosperity for future. Thank you very much.
Well, to hear it out of a Flummy's mouth itself. I'm going to have to say, before I let you go this evening, well, a few things I want to say. You're going to be back. I'm going to allow you to waste more chopper fuel. Promise. You're allowed to. On this channel, you're allowed to waste chopper fuel. Anyway, my last operational flight, we threw half of it in the sea. It could have gone in one of your Flamgat jobs and been used properly. So, okay, I want to know, out of your mouth, please describe to me from when you, at the end of the runway and you release brakes and you club that stick forward. The first 60 seconds, please. Please tell me.
It's very, very difficult to give you the sensation. So let me try and make an analogy. Have you driven a 50cc motorcycle? You have. Okay. If you then now go from a 50cc motorcycle to a 750 or 1000cc motorcycle, the first couple of weeks and days, you have no idea how much power you're sitting underneath, and it is dangerous. And that's flying a Mirage. Going from Harvards to Impalas, we had that jump. Going from the Impala to the Mirage 3, we had that jump. The Mirage 3, on my first flight in the Mirage 3, the first thing you have to try and get used to is the noise is so much lower. It's not such a high-pitched whine like the Impala's got, because it's further back and behind you. The other thing that you find very, very, I wouldn't say difficult, but strange, is you're actually sitting either on or in front of the nose wheel. Whereas with the Impala, you're sitting behind the nose wheel. So when you start taxiing out, you've actually got to go past the yellow stripe and then turn and follow it with your bum, basically. So these are all things you've got to get used to. In your first flight, you've had 10 hours in the simulator, and now you're going for your first flight with an instructor in the back seat. Pull onto the runway, crank open the power, and you hear this roar behind you. Check all the gauges. I let go of the brakes. My head went thunk against the bloody parachute behind me, and I literally developed tunnel vision from the acceleration. To such a degree, I could only see one gauge at a time. And with 1,000 hours in an Impala, you know exactly where the speed indicator is. Now suddenly it's not there. Now you've got to start looking for it. By the time I found the speed indicator, the instructor had taken over, taken the wheels away, and we were doing 240 knots. That acceleration was mind-blowing. And I don't know, maybe the closest to get to that afterwards was I went for a flip in a glider, where they pull the glider with a winch to get it airborne. And that was some serious acceleration without the sound to get that glide into the air. My ultimate thrill would be an aircraft carrier. The takeoff and the landing on that little postage stamp. Those guys, I take my hat off for all of them, and every single one of them. Not only during the day, but in bad weather and at night. Make my day. I'm telling you, the chopper jobs have got something to learn there.
Yeah, we do it slow, slow. I'm a slow type. Yeah, absolutely. Flying.
You're there for the sightseeing.
Say again?
You're there for the sightseeing.
More or less, yes. That's why I stayed on Allos. We weren't supposed to fly at night, so I could go to the pub and have a toot.
Awesome.
Yeah, what happened? They made us fly dark moon in flippin' Novemberland when it's flat like that, and there's no moon, there's no nothing, and you navigate on the odd fire on
Yes.
at low level, you know what I mean? Until you see on Dangs's glow, well, Oshikati's glow. Fun.
No. I take my hat off to you guys as well, having to do that at night with no aids. I mean, I don't think anybody would believe there was no GPSs in those days. The Impalas had ADF. We all know in the thunderstorm they're useless. We had VRR in board our aircraft, but there was no VRR peeking up on the border, so we couldn't use that. So everything was, as we put it, the proverbial Celtics roadmap and a compass and a stopwatch. And that's how we operated. And how we found everything we were looking for can only be attributed to the excellent training we were given.
Absolutely.
Build up to that.
Absolutely. Distance and time.
Distance and time.
And Allo's main compass was your aeroplane or an Impala standby compass. That's why there were always many of them around. Standby compasses. Anybody's got them. I can go and nick them out of an imp for a compass.
Okay, there we go. So now we know where to come and look for them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Arthur, I'm not gonna carry on. We would love to have you back. That humor is coming through. So yes, please, sir. I'm saying we want you back. My eyes have obviously floated between the two different items behind you. You can tell us more about that another day. You can tell us, I've seen one or two photos in an article of your Mirage at the end of the runway in the sandpit there. There's so much more that you can come and share with us, and we would love to have you back. And we would really appreciate you building a serious Vlamgat presence here for us. It's so appreciated. And yes, you can have a little bit more of my chopper fuel. You can have you must put a little gas burner or something on the back of your you can use after for that.
Okay. Well, I got a very nice story for the future. I was sent to Oshkosh, and there's a whole twist in the tail on that one, which will take me another hour to explain to you. So
for sure.
Okay,
Arthur, hold on. Just before you go, before we started the recording earlier on, you mentioned something about Mayday, a group that you affiliated with. Can you give us a little bit more about that before we say our good evenings for the night?
Yes, Fossey, thank you very much for the opportunity. Mayday is a organization started in 2016, I think it was. Mayday was started, if you can remember, there was a serious albatross accident out of Jenin, 2011. 2 albatrosses flew into the mountains, and there were 13, 14 people on board, and wives and children and colleagues. And there's a need for a peer-to-peer group whereby Mayday will supply you with an ear, if you want to put it that way. So we will go in and we'll sit down and we'll chat. Everything will be 100% confidential. Nothing is discussed outside of the room. There's no cell phones, there's no recordings, there's no notes taken, nothing. So that you get the opportunity to talk. Mental wellness is a big issue. And I'm sure during COVID, with all the pilots losing all their jobs, not having an income, it was huge. And we all know, and I'm probably going to get shot for saying this, but generally speaking, the average male does not like to admit there's a problem, because to them it's a sign of weakness. To me, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of courage to know that you're in a situation that you cannot handle and you're going to need assistance. Not everybody needs it, but if you do need it, we're there. If you go and see a psychologist or a doctor and you're in the airlines, they're going to ground you immediately. And we are now there so that you can, for any reason whatsoever, doesn't necessarily have to be aviation oriented. We do concentrate specifically on the aviation fraternity, i.e. the pilots, the cabin crew, the aircraft technicians. We've even got ATNS, the air traffic controllers, are all involved now with this. And Mayday's got a hotline and a website that you can go and have a look at. I will pass on the details for you. And it's worldwide. The Germans have got one that's very strong as well. I don't know about any of the other countries, but we've been following their footprint, so to say, and they've been supporting us tremendously. So I would really like to encourage anybody that feels they have the need to talk, to get hold of Mayday SA, and let's chat. more than willing to sit down. And if I can't handle it, there are more than enough peers out there from every walk of life. Everybody who's had accidents, who haven't had accidents, who are aviators, who are air traffic controllers, are there to help. So it's mayday-sa.org.za. You can go look it up on the website. All the numbers and everything are there. So I'd like to promote them a little bit.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you. Yes, and the links will be scroll on the screen, and they'll be provided in the comments downstairs or down below. You know what I mean. Yes, and that ties into with one of the legacy conversations functions. There's a playlist on the legacy conversations channel called Legacy Partners, and psychological help is freely available to vets and their families. So very much along the same line, conversation. That's what this channel is about. Talking, as Arthur has mentioned, it's therapeutic, it's needed. And if you can have a confidential service, why not? Thank you again, sir. Much appreciated. And we are looking forward to the next conversation, chat. You can tell us about burning more good chopper fuel. Whatever you can tell us about. You mentioned Oshkosh offline, so there's stories here aplenty, and we're going to start a backlog, and then we're going to fill all those little slots in the next weeks and months. Once again, I thank you very much, and I'm going to say to all of you out there, thank you for watching. It's much appreciated. Until we meet again, God bless.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Fossey. Good night.